Good morning. The date is Sunday, March 1st, 2026, and the world woke up this morning to a reality it had feared but never fully prepared for. The United States of America and Israel have launched a massive, coordinated military offensive against the Islamic Republic of Iran. As we bring you this report, bombs are still falling, missiles are still flying, fires are still burning in Tehran, in Tel Aviv, in Dubai, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, and across a region that is now engulfed in the flames of open warfare. What began as a high-stakes nuclear standoff has exploded, literally, into a full-scale military confrontation with global repercussions. Stay with us. We will take you through every development, every detail, and every dimension of this breaking story. This is not a drill. This is not a simulation. This is war. To understand what is happening today, we must go back not just weeks or months, but decades. The United States and Iran have been locked in a deep and bitter hostility since 1979, when the Islamic Revolution overthrew the US-backed Shah and Iranian students seized the American embassy in Tehran, holding 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. What followed was 4.5 decades of sanctions, proxy wars, terror attacks, and mutual mistrust that never truly healed. But the most dangerous dimension of this rivalry has always been Iran's nuclear program. For years, Iran insisted its nuclear activities were purely peaceful for energy and medical research. But the international community, led by the United States and Israel, argued Tehran was racing toward a nuclear weapon. Multiple rounds of sanctions, diplomatic negotiations, and even the landmark 2015 JCPOA nuclear deal, which the Trump administration abandoned in 2018, failed to permanently resolve the issue. In early 2026, there appeared to be a glimmer of hope. Oman had been quietly mediating indirect nuclear negotiations between Washington and Tehran. Just one day before the bombs fell, on February 27, 2026, Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi made a stunning announcement. A breakthrough had been reached. Iran had allegedly agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium and had consented to full verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Peace, he said, was within reach. But that breakthrough, if it ever truly existed, was not enough to stop what was already set in motion. In the early hours of Saturday, February 28, 2026, American and Israeli warplanes began their assault. The window for diplomacy had slammed shut. At approximately 2:30 in the morning Washington time, President Donald Trump appeared before the American people in a pre-dawn address to announce what he called major combat operations against the Islamic Republic of Iran. The operation, named Operation Epic Fury by the United States Department of Defense and called Operation Roaring Lion by the Israeli Defense Forces, was described as the most ambitious joint military strike ever undertaken by the two allies. Trump stated that the primary objective of the strikes was to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime. He specifically cited Iran's nuclear program and missile industry as the key targets. "We are going to annihilate their navy," he said. "We will destroy their missiles and raze their missile industry to the ground." The president had reportedly monitored the unfolding operations from the White House Situation Room, alongside Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. The scale of the operation was breathtaking. U.S. Navy F, divided by a -18F Super Hornet aircraft, launched from the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, participated in what Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth later described as the most lethal, most complex, and most precision aerial operation in history. Targets across Iran were struck simultaneously from command and control centers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to missile production facilities, to naval assets, to air defense systems and military air bases. Explosions rocked the Iranian capital Tehran through the night and into Sunday morning. Plumes of smoke rose over residential areas of the city. Strikes were reported near the offices of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, near the IRGC headquarters in University Street and the Jamhuri area. But Tehran was not alone. Explosions were also reported in Isfahan, Qom, Tabriz, Kermanshah, Ilum, Karaj, and across Lorestan province. Iran's internet was almost entirely shut down starting around 2 a.m., leaving millions in the dark, literally and figuratively. On Sunday morning, the Israeli Defense Forces announced a new wave of strikes in what they called the Heart of Tehran, the first strikes under their component of the operation, Operation Roaring Lion. The IDF stated that the large-scale strikes of Saturday had established aerial superiority and paved the path to Tehran for the follow-on operations. In the most seismic development of this already historic conflict, Iranian state television confirmed on Sunday morning that the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, 86 years old and the absolute ruler of the Islamic Republic since 1989, was killed in the American-Israeli strikes on Tehran. He was only the second supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic, having taken power after the death of the revolution's founder, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. President Trump confirmed Khamenei's death in a Truth Social post, writing that he was one of the most evil people in history. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, speaking at a press conference, declared, "This tyrant no longer exists." For 3 decades, he has been sending terror with proxies and has made his people miserable. This plan and program no longer exists. Netanyahu's words reflected decades of Israeli anxiety over Iranian threats to eliminate the Jewish state. Khamenei was not the only high-value target eliminated. The IDF confirmed that 40 senior Iranian commanders had been killed since the start of the operation, including General Abdolrahim Mousavi, the chief of staff of the Iranian armed forces. The IDF stated that the majority of the highest-ranking senior military officials of the Iranian security leadership had been eliminated. It was nothing short of a decapitation strike. In the immediate aftermath, Iran moved quickly to maintain governmental continuity. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian announced in a pre-recorded message on state television that a new interim leadership council has begun its work. Iran's constitution provides for this. When a supreme leader dies or is incapacitated, a council composed of the president, the head of the judiciary, and a member of the Guardian Council takes over temporarily. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told Al Jazeera that a new supreme leader would be chosen within 1 or 2 days. The price of this war is already being paid in American blood. At 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, March 1st, United States Central Command, CENTCOM, issued a sober and painful announcement. 3 U.S. service members have been killed in action, and 5 more have been seriously wounded as part of Operation Epic Fury. Several others sustained minor shrapnel injuries and concussions and were being returned to duty. The names of the fallen have not been released, pending notification of their families, a tradition of care and respect for those who give the ultimate sacrifice. CENTCOM stated that the identities would be withheld for 24 hours after next-of-kin notifications. Major combat operations continue and our response effort is ongoing, the command said. President Trump had warned the American people on Saturday that casualties were a real possibility. That often happens in war, he said. But we are doing this not for now. We are doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. These are the first known American combat deaths of this operation, and given that CENTCOM has stated that major operations are ongoing, they may not be the last. Iran has not absorbed these blows silently. Tehran has launched a ferocious retaliatory campaign targeting Israel and U.S. military assets across the Gulf region. According to Israeli Defense Ministry data, since the start of the conflict, Iran has launched 165 ballistic missiles, 2 cruise missiles, and 541 drones toward Israel alone. Of those, 152 ballistic missiles, both cruise missiles, and 506 drones were intercepted. 13 ballistic missiles fell into the sea, and 35 drones landed within Israeli territory, causing material damage and casualties. Air raid sirens screamed across Tel Aviv on Sunday as fresh Iranian missiles were incoming. The Israeli military said it was working to intercept them. In the Israeli city of Beit Shemesh, located just miles from Jerusalem, at least 8 people were killed when Iranian missiles struck a residential area. Initial reports had put the death toll at 4, but it rose to 8, a reminder that this war is killing civilians, not just soldiers. Beyond Israel, Iran also targeted U.S. military installations across the Gulf. The UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Jordan, nations that host American forces, were all subjected to Iranian missile and drone attacks. At Kuwait International Airport, Iran launched strikes that sent the Kuwaiti prime minister personally visiting wounded victims in hospital. At Abu Dhabi's Zayed International Airport, an intercepted Iranian drone killed 1 Asian national and left 7 others injured. At Dubai International Airport, one of the world's busiest, an intercepted Iranian drone caused a minor fire on the outer facade of the iconic Burj Al Arab Hotel, while one of the berths at Jebel Ali Port caught fire from debris. On Sunday morning, the IRGC warned it would launch its most intense offensive operation in a matter of moments. President Trump, reading this threat, fired back immediately on Truth Social. Iran just stated that they are going to hit very hard today, harder than they have ever been hit before. They better not do that, however, because if they do, we will hit them with a force that has never been seen before. The threat and counter-threat cycle has reached a fever pitch. Meanwhile, CENTCOM announced that an Iranian Jammer-class naval corvette had been struck by U.S. forces and was sinking to the bottom of the Gulf of Oman. As the president said, members of Iran's armed forces, IRGC and police must lay down your weapons. Abandon ship, CENTCOM stated, a direct appeal to Iranian personnel to stand down. As in every war, it is the innocent who pay the heaviest price. And perhaps the most haunting story to emerge from this conflict is that of the girls' school in Minab, a city in southern Iran. According to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency, more than 140 children were killed and another 95 injured when a strike hit the primary school. There were approximately 170 students inside the building at the time. The world has been confronted with images of grief-stricken parents and rescue workers digging through rubble for survivors. Across Tehran and other Iranian cities, civilians have been caught in the crossfire of a conflict they had no say in starting. Smoke over residential neighborhoods, families fleeing, hospitals overwhelmed. This is the human reality behind the military headlines. The International Committee of the Red Cross has called on all parties to respect the rules of war and protect civilian lives. The war has already sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefields. More than 14,000 departure and arrival flights have been affected globally, according to estimates from aviation tracking services. On Sunday alone, another 1,579 flights in and out of major Middle East airports were canceled. Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest international hub, saw 70% of its scheduled flights canceled. Israel and Qatar saw similarly devastating cancellations of approximately 70%. Etihad Airways suspended all flights to and from Abu Dhabi until further notice. Passengers who had flown into the region, some for business, some for holidays, some to visit family, found themselves stranded in airports across Beirut, Dubai, Doha, and beyond. Airline apps crashed. Travel insurance phone lines were overwhelmed. Hundreds of thousands of people are now stuck in a region at war. On the energy front, OPEC Plus has agreed to a modest production increase of 206,000 barrels per day, but analysts warn this may do little to contain the oil price shock as markets open on Monday. The Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of the world's oil supply passes, is now a war zone. Tankers have diverted, insurance premiums have spiked, and energy markets worldwide are in a state of high anxiety. World leaders have responded to the outbreak of war with a mixture of alarm, condemnation, and, in some cases, cautious support. The global reaction reflects the profound divisions in international opinion over this conflict. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney expressed support for U.S. efforts to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. France's President Emmanuel Macron warned that the conflict carries grave consequences for international peace and security, saying the escalation is dangerous for everyone. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas described the situation as perilous and called for civilians to be protected and international law upheld. Norway's foreign minister said the attack is not in line with international law, stating that preventive attacks require an immediately imminent threat. Oman's foreign minister, whose country had been mediating the nuclear talks, expressed dismay at the outbreak of violence, urging the U.S. to not get sucked in further and saying plainly, "This is not your war." Qatar, which itself came under Iranian fire, condemned the Iranian attack as a flagrant violation of its national sovereignty. The UAE similarly condemned the Iranian strikes targeting its territory and warned of grave consequences if they continued. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned the foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Iraq that they could become legitimate targets if they allowed their territory to be used for attacks on Iran. North Korea issued a sharp condemnation, calling the U.S. and Israeli behavior shameless and gangster-like, and denouncing what it termed a war of aggression. Venezuela's foreign ministry called the strikes a dangerous and unprecedented escalation. Russia and China also issued critical statements. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV called on all parties to stop the spiral of violence, warning that the war could lead to a tragedy of enormous proportions. At home in the United States, the political debate is already intense. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont called the operation an illegal, premeditated, and unconstitutional war, accusing Trump of acting unilaterally without a declaration of war from Congress, as the U.S. Constitution requires. Most Democrats echoed concerns about the constitutional legality of the strikes. However, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, often a dissenting voice within his own party, backed the operation, praising Trump for doing what's right and necessary to produce real peace in the region. Republican Senator Tom Cotton said, "The butcher's bill has finally come due for the Ayatollahs." Congress is expected to vote on a war powers resolution in the coming week. Perhaps one of the most complex and emotionally charged dimensions of this story is the reaction of ordinary Iranians, both inside the country and in the diaspora. Iran's government declared 40 days of national mourning for the death of Supreme Leader Khamenei. Iranian state television carried solemn broadcasts of religious mourning. But on the streets of several Iranian cities, Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and Kermanshah, a very different scene was unfolding. Reports and social media videos, despite Iran's near-total internet shutdown, showed crowds of Iranians taking to the streets to celebrate the death of Khamenei. These are people who have lived for decades under the repression of the Islamic Republic, who remember the brutal crackdowns, the restrictions on women and minorities, the crushing of political dissent, the manipulation of elections. For many of them, Khamenei was not a beloved leader, but a hated tyrant. Their celebrations are a stark and painful reminder of the complicated human reality behind this conflict. In Los Angeles, home to the largest Iranian diaspora community outside of Iran, often called Tehrangeals, crowds gathered outside the Wilshire Federal Building in Westwood, carrying Iranian, American, and Israeli flags. Many in the diaspora come from families who fled the theocratic regime that took over in 1979. For some of them, this moment represents a long-awaited reckoning. For others, the fear of civilian casualties and the chaos of war overshadows any sense of hope. As we bring you this report, the situation remains deeply uncertain and dangerously fluid. Several critical questions hang over the coming hours and days. Who will lead Iran? The Interim Leadership Council has been formed, but selecting a new supreme leader, a figure who is meant to represent the divine authority of the Islamic Republic, is not a simple or quick process. Iran's foreign minister has said a choice will be made in 1 or 2 days, but the power struggle within Iran's elite could be intense and destabilizing. Will Iran escalate or negotiate? The IRGC has promised its most intense offensive ever. But the deaths of 40 senior commanders, the destruction of key military infrastructure, and the loss of Khamenei himself have dealt a devastating blow to Iran's military command structure. Some analysts believe Iran may seek an off-ramp. President Trump himself has said he has several off-ramps available for Operation Epic Fury. But whether either side is willing to take those off-ramps in the current atmosphere of fury and retaliation is deeply unclear. Will the conflict spread further? Iran has already threatened Gulf states that host U.S. forces. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and other Iranian-backed proxy groups may be activated. Pakistan has seen protests outside the U.S. consulate in Karachi. The risk of further regional escalation or even miscalculation leading to a broader conflict cannot be dismissed. And above all, what about the nuclear question that started all of this? Trump said his administration had previously struck Iran's nuclear program in 2025. His goal, he says, is to ensure that Iran never obtains a nuclear weapon. Whether the strikes of Operation Epic Fury have achieved that goal, or whether they have simply pushed the region closer to an even more catastrophic conflict, is a question that only time will answer. Ladies and gentlemen, we are witnessing history. Whatever your political views, whatever your nationality, whatever your faith, the events of the past 48 hours have fundamentally altered the landscape of the Middle East and, potentially, the world. A supreme leader has been killed. A massive U.S.-Israeli military operation is ongoing. Iran is retaliating across an entire region. 3 American soldiers are dead. Over 140 schoolgirls in Iran have lost their lives. And 14,000 flights, representing hundreds of thousands of people's lives and livelihoods, have been disrupted. We do not know how this ends. We do not know how long this will last. We do not know whether the world is on the edge of a regional war or whether diplomacy will somehow reassert itself in the days ahead. What we do know is that every life lost, American, Iranian, Israeli, Emirati, Kuwaiti, is a human life. A son or daughter, a parent, a friend. In the arithmetic of geopolitics, it is easy to lose sight of that. Our job as journalists is to make sure you never do. This is a developing story. We will continue to bring you live updates as they happen. For our online audiences, stay connected to our website and social media channels for the very latest. For those of you in the affected region, please stay safe, stay indoors, and follow the guidance of local authorities. This has been a special breaking news report on Operation Epic Fury, the U.S.-Israel war on Iran. We'll be right back after this brief break. Do not go anywhere.